Swine influenza, it's been around for many, many, many years, right? It's not a new virus, but it's been around for many years. But it's been in the last, I would say, 20 years that it just been harder to control at the farm level. So this is a virus that likes to change and likes to mix with other influenza viruses. And when that happens, it has the possibility to cause new disease and just makes the life of the producers and the veterinarians harder because we have to be more creative on how to address it at the farm level.
Swine it.
Hi, welcome to our latest edition of Swine It Podcast. I'm Jerry Purvis, your host. Today we have two guests. It's kind of a nutrition versus vets here, but we're happy here to have Dr. Montserrat Torremorell and Dr. Keith Wilson. Torremorell is a professor at the University of Minnesota, where she studied swine influenza and doing research with other diseases. Dr. Wilson, Keith Wilson here, is with us today as well, and he is a independent consultant working with producers and particularly Vaccinova. So welcome to both of you today, and I'll let you both of you kind of tell a little bit about your journey and where you are today.
Okay, I'll start. So I've been in swine practice pretty much my entire practice career. I've been practicing since 1986. I joined Newport Labs in 2011 as a technical services veterinarian. And I was with Newport Labs and retired in 2020, or actually end of 2019, and then started to do independent consulting with Vaccinova when Vaccinova bought Newport Labs from Boehringer Ingelheim. So that's kind of my perspective on it. I've been in the vaccine world for quite a while and working with influenza for a good part of that time.
Very good.
And I'm Montserrat Torremorell. I'm, as you said, a professor at the University of Minnesota. And I joined the university 15 years ago when we were in the middle of the swine flu pandemic, if you remember, in 2009. And prior to that, I was at PIC. But when I went to the university, I felt like we needed to do some research on swine influenza and understand more what to do at the farm level to understand how influenza gets transmitted and what else can we do to control it and to eliminate it. So since I've been at the university, some of my research focuses on influenza and trying to answer some of those questions that I hope we try to address today. So thank you for having me.
Very good. So today, it's no secret, I guess our focus is on swine influenza. A very pertinent topic, as we were talking earlier. We had a break on a couple of our farms a couple of months ago. So it's something that producers, are constantly fighting with. And many times we don't understand. We're confused. What do we do? Can we vaccine? What are some of the things that we can do that we can mitigate this? But so let's just dive in. And I promise, as I said, we got nutrition versus vets, and I promise not to throw any rocks, and we won't blame the feed, and we'll be cordial here. But all seriously, let's dive right into swine influenza.
Why risk it? Your herd may have antigenic gaps that are not being covered by the products currently available. Custom-made vaccines provide a unique advantage in that they can be formulated to a herd's specific bacterial and viral needs. Choose the exact isolates, adjuvant, packaging, and size you need with Vaccinova for a vaccine formulated to your needs. Find out more by visiting us at vaccinova.us.com. That's VAXXINOVA.us.com.
Maybe, whoever wants to take this, what is swine influenza that you see in our facilities?
Go ahead, Monsi.
Yeah, so this virus, swine influenza, it's been around for many, many, many years, right? It's not a new virus, but it's been around for many years. But it's been in the last, I would say, 20 years that it just been harder to control at the farm level. So this is a virus that likes to change and likes to mix with other influenza viruses. And when that happens, it has the possibility to cause new disease and just makes the life of the producers and the veterinarians harder because we have to be more creative on how to address it at the farm level. So, but fortunately, we have tools that I know we will be discussing it. But as frustrating as it can be, because once in a while we will have breaks in the farm, as you said, it happened to you, there are things we can do. Traditionally, we always think that pigs are a good source of influenza viruses to people. But actually, what we've learned also over the years that more recently is that people can also be a source of viruses to the pigs. And also pigs can have viruses from other species like avian influenza and so on. And pigs are good at taking those viruses and making their own viruses. So that's part of the challenge here. But all in all, this is a virus that it's been around, nothing new. What it's new is that now we just have more of them. And that's why we want to do something about it. So.
Very good. So as we think about, when you have a break, what is typically how you get that? I mean, is it a lot of times it's hard to really track down, where was your point of entry? How does that typically get into a farm or a system?
I don't think we ever know for sure. There are a lot of places it can come in. And we talk about biosecurity, obviously, when new animals come into the farm, always a high risk. Influenza is a virus, so it's spread in the air. So if you're in a region where there's a lot of viruses, you're susceptible because it could blow in from a surrounding farm. And always you have the people. People are another avenue, and they're walking in the barn, and they can bring viruses from the outside in as well. So come from a number of sources, and identifying which viruses you have kind of helps us sort that out as well. But it does show us that we need to be very diligent on identifying the viruses we have, but also being very diligent in regards to the biosecurity component.
And you made a good point, and something our system, we've constantly required employees to get vaccinated. So can an employee, I think there's a lot of confusion there, can an employee actually bring the flu into your farm and transmit to pigs?
Indeed, it can. He or she can do that. I mean, unknowingly, right? I mean, if you're sick,
right.
some strains of the flu viruses that affect people, depending on the season and depending on how much sick you are or how much virus you might be shedding, there is always that chance that then the pigs can take that virus as their own, and that virus just get mixed up with the other viruses that you have in the farm. And that's how some of these strains stay in the farms. Yeah, indeed, that's a very good possibility.
So there is, as we think about, there's some bidirectional transmission. Can it go back the other way? Humans get, from pigs. And is that a danger to human health? Is that something, as these strains get mixed and they change? What are your thoughts there?
It certainly is a possibility, and there has been documented cases when that happens, and there is plenty of those. But the frequency on those happening might not be as often as the opposite, people infecting pigs, right? But obviously, influenza is one of those diseases that the CDC or public health keeps an eye very closely, the same as now they are keeping an eye on high-path avian influenza, just because those viruses sometimes can be unpredictable. That's how every many years we have pandemics, and that there is always that risk once in a while that can happen, affect people. And that's why as producers and veterinarians, we just have to look at this disease with a slightly set of eyes compared to PRRS, for instance. This is just not a disease that affects the pigs only. It has also the potential to affect people. So when we think about the control of this disease, we shouldn't just measure how good the control is based on, it just reduces growth, or makes the pigs grow better if we vaccinate. It's also about the burden of the disease and the ability then to cause disease and transfer to people that we need to take in consideration.
Yeah. So if we think about, in our situation, sometimes it's hard to really diagnose. What are some of the signs that that clinically you may have the flu, that you've got that in your herd? What are some of the things that you could see a caregiver would notice that might lead to thinking this is a possibility?
Yeah, so it's primarily a respiratory disease. So depending on where you're looking, I mean, you can have it in a sow herd and maybe not even know it is circulating. You may see some sows that would go off feed, and if you were to take the temperatures, probably some fevers on those affected sows, and maybe there's a slight cough in the barn. But it's really hard to sort that out unless you get some diagnostics. Now, I think the classic influenza in the nurseries are post-weaning. When you wean those pigs, you mix them up, and you'll see a lot of coughing. And obviously, a cough can come from a number of organisms. And so, again, the diagnostics are pretty important to sort that out. And I would almost guarantee you, if you're sorting out these diagnostics, you're going to have more than one thing there. And so, so it gets a little bit of confusing. Are a little confusing, but so the job of the veterinarian is to sort out what are the most significant issues here. What do we need to go after and focus on that? And I think one of the confusing things about influenza is that there's nothing we can do about it. And I think back in the early 2012, 2013, University of Minnesota did some very good research to show that vaccines will work. Killed vaccines will do an excellent job of protecting the pig against getting infected with influenza, as well as vaccinating the sows and reduce shedding. So it was almost the more the research came out that showed the vaccines are working, the more people backed off of it, because I think they were confused and concerned that there's so many different viruses out there, we just can't stay ahead of it. And so if we have the right strains in the vaccine, we feel we can do a good job. If we don't, then that's right. The vaccines aren't going to work. And that's, there was a lot of that going on, a lot of vaccines being used that did not have the right strains in them. And so therefore, they did not work. Veterinarians, producers would throw their hands up and say, I'm going to stop vaccinating because there's nothing I can do about it. Since that time, the USDA has done a fabulous job of tracking and characterizing the different viruses that are in the different regions. And so if we take the time to do the diagnostics, doing the sequencing, we got a pretty good idea what viruses are out there. Then we can formulate a more strategic plan that I think can be quite effective.
He makes some good points. I think it's hard to diagnose exactly. There's a lot of different things that could be going on with the same symptoms. So you got to do diagnostics. Sound like you got to do your due diligence, and once you get a kind of an idea of what you have, it's not a hopeless situation. There are options to vaccinate, and as we know, the diversity of the strains. But you made a point. You and I were talking that typically maybe in a system it's not as diverse. You may be down to not a multitude of strains in a system. Is that correct? That'd be a fair statement.
I think that's very fair. And we do a lot of monitoring within Vaccinova with the diagnostic samples that come in, because we would make vaccines from the viruses that come in, and we're monitoring those viruses, putting them into clades, doing our testing to know, is this a different virus? I don't really have a percentage, but the majority of the time, maybe 70% of the time, maybe 80%, there are not new viruses that have come in over a period of a year. They will be there. You need to be aware of them. But for the most part, that virus population is pretty stable.
Yeah. So, as we start talking about vaccination is a real possibility, of mitigating. What do we, and I know as producers, we're always looking for what is the return. What I'm going to invest this on a vaccine or in my program. What's the impact first? What's the cost? If I've got swine, if I've got flu in my herd, what's that cost, or what could be that cost? You got any ideas what that range of?
Well, that's a good question, and there is quite a range. And certainly, experientially, we'll see there's some nurseries that get affected, and our assessment is very little cost. However, we might not be measuring daily gain and things like that. There are reports in the literature that would say there can be up to a $10 loss per pig for that. I mean, I think that's extreme, but there's a wide range. And what's the return? It depends on what your strategy is. Most farms will vaccinate the sows. If we are doing a diligent job making an effort to find out what viruses are circulating in the sow herd and vaccinate against that, we can mitigate a lot of the post-weaning issues in the nursery with the pigs. And so you're vaccinating the sow and protecting, 10, 12 pigs that are being weaned. I think you can get a pretty good cost-effective program there. Again, depending on what you and your veterinarian decide what your clinical impact of influenza is at that stage of production.
I was going to mention, built on what Keith said, because in the US, most of the protocols rely on sow vaccination. But it's also important to recognize how do we vaccinate the sows, right? Is it the pre-farrowing mass vaccination? And then the gills too. And I think all those actually have proven to be good tools, that all of them will help to produce a pig at weaning that will have less virus. The other thing, however, that we've learned is that vaccines are also the most effective at producing that pig to be negative at weaning, or that has less risk at weaning, when we work on the vaccine in the sows, but also on some of that biosecurity inside the farm, preventing those piglets from getting exposed to the virus. Okay, so that's also very important, because remember, the piglets are born influenza negative. So it's different than PRRS virus. They are born influenza negative. And then we keep them in the farm for 21 days until we wean them. And often, if they don't have the right maternal immunity that the vaccine gave them, or if they get a lot of challenge just because the way how we move the viruses are inside the farm, right? I mean, this is a virus that it's very contagious. I mean, we can carry it in the hands. Workers can carry it around the clothing. Those piglets can have a huge challenge of virus that then overcomes the protection of the vaccine. So then we have to bring both together, okay? And then working with your veterinarian to design those protocols about the vaccine. How do we vaccinate? Mass vaccination, seasonal vaccination, pre-farrowing vaccination, plus understanding where the virus is inside the farm so that you can prevent that transmission and exposure in the first place. That's where we've seen is the best combination of the protocols, when you bring both pieces together to control the flu virus.
Good, very good. So, you've talked a little bit about what are some of you're using vaccines as a tool, but what are some of the other tools? I know you mentioned biosecurity. What are some of the things that producers can do today to maybe prevent this from getting to her, maybe, or prevent some of the outbreaks? What are some things that you see as you work with producers? What are some things you see that they can do differently to help mitigate some of these challenges?
I mean, one point that you can do that we've seen, like if you introduce positive gills, for instance, it's more likely that you will be weaning positive pigs. So what can you do? You can put gills in isolation, monitor the gills coming in, and keep them in an isolation for longer periods of time, right? To collect oral fluids on arrival, and then 30 days later, or sometimes 40 days later. Sometimes you have to extend those isolation during that GDU period. Make sure that you don't have active virus in the GDU. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing is just what I was saying before. We've seen that employees very easily, if there is virus at the farm, and in particular at weaning, clothing gets contaminated very easily, the hands. So after loading the pigs in the morning, maybe before you go back to the processing, as basic as changing clothes and washing hands, that's one way to preventing from moving the virus into those younger pigs. So there are that type of strategies, which would be very similar to what we do with other diseases, that I think we should just be more targeting those more for the flu as well. And it's not like you have to do very intense protocols forever. Maybe you do 4 weeks or 6 weeks of very intense protocols, combining the vaccination plus those biosecurity to really break that cycle of transmission. And after that, just keep the farm vaccinated. And I don't know whether you would agree with that, Keith, but that's how I look at it in my, trying to link those pieces together.
Yeah, so when I was in practice in the early days when I was working at Newport, the gilts are the lifeblood of a farm. And we need those to come in, and we would test them for PRRS, and we would test them for PRRS. And when they were PRRS negative, we would bring them in, or PRRS stable. We didn't care about the flu. And oftentimes they were flu positive, and they were shedding, and they were coming in. And like Monty said, if you're bringing in positive gilts, you will wean positive pigs. And and I get it, because, you got to bring those gilts in, and PRRS is probably the worst of those two evils, but we're still bringing in an evil in there. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but if we know what virus is going into those gilts and we have prepared them with a vaccine, we will greatly reduce that chances of that gilt shedding virus into the sourwood when she comes.
Yeah. So I get, it sounds like the most important thing is we got to monitor and do our due diligence and understanding what we have. And then, as you said, anytime you bring a gilt into a farm, that's a health risk. And so if we can manage that gilt's health prior, bringing that in, and to your point, everybody's, we're all worried about PRRS, but flu is, you're going to have breaks every year. And to you guys' point, it's almost like we just throw our hands up and say, we just live with it, but we don't have to. So it sounds like we've got some opportunities to reverse that a little bit and maybe improve the health of our herds. Very good. So, well, Keith, do you have a comment?
I was just going to say, really one of the goals of us talking about this is to remove some of the mystery. And I think, talking to veterinarians, there's a lot of things to worry about out there, whether it's PRRS, mycoplasma, streps, and flu sometimes gets ignored because there's a lot of science behind it, and we got to do some diagnostics, and there's a lot of names attached to these viruses. But at the end of the day, we have the tools and technology to try to clear the air or remove some of the fog from what's going on with influenza in the sow farms.
Yeah, sounds like it's not a hopeless case. It's something that we can manage and improve.
We certainly something we need to do more. I think to do more. So. Yeah,
I agree. Health is such an important part of your performance. Here I'm gonna kudos to the vets. The guy, the keeper of health, because you can't have good performance if you don't have good health.
Health is king.
Yeah, if you could spend $1 on health, it's going to return. Whatever it's biosecurity or your vaccine program, those animals are going to perform if we can get them in a healthy state. So we all nutritious vets will agree on that.
We'll agree on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll find a common ground there.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, very good. I really appreciate you guys today. This is a good topic. It's a pertinent topic. As I said, we've lived through these breaks, and it's just nagging. And I think I've got some tools personally. I've got some tools, to take back to our production group, and there is hope. maybe we can manage that. So very good.
It's time for our famous three. An animal nutrition technology company offering innovative products and new applications for the swine industry. The combination of AB Vista enzymes, technical services, and nutrition expertise provides the industry with new opportunities to further improve production efficiencies. Fiber is receiving renewed interest due to its influence on the microbiome, and AB Vista has brought together research experts to discuss the industry's knowledge of fiber functionality and to introduce a Stimbiotic, targeted to improve fiber digestion. To request access, contact NAM at abvista.com. That's NAM at abvista.com.
Well, at the end of our podcast, we always ask three questions. So we're going to ask both of you, whoever wants to go first. But what is your favorite resource?
Well, as a book, certainly The Disease of Swine is still a good book as a reference. I do use it. So I will choose that one. I guess I didn't know you were going to ask us this question, so I will use that one for now.
That's good. That's a good choice. Good answer.
Yeah, I would agree. The Diseases of Swine is it's the Bible that we go to, and I still pull that out every once in a while to get updated. Maybe not updated, but get some background in a disease. I don't see that often.
Very good, very good. And also, what do you, if you think, just reflect back on your career, maybe list a person or persons that had the most influence on your career.
Yeah, it's coming from the University of Minnesota, and I was in vet school right at the time that Al Lehman had a lot of impact there. And I know a lot of people will reference Al as having an impact on their practice career, but he really set the tone and the direction of swine practice. Certainly when I started, it was 1986, and having that perspective of trying to manage health for the betterment of the producer and the pig is really, I think, has been a big guiding part of my career.
Yeah, and just to build on what he said, I never met Al Lehman, although when I moved to the University of Minnesota, I was the Al Lehman chair, so that was very an honor. But in my days as a student, obviously my advisor at that time, Carlos Pijoan, and then the late Bob Morrison, Hansui Ju, later on Scott D. So I think there is a lot of people in that at the university that I think they've been very influential at many levels. So I would like to recognize them.
You can tell we're from Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota. Well, hey, that's a pretty good list of who's in the industry. I'd have to say. So, very good. Last question. We'll take you off the hot seat here, but what are you thinking about? Your researchers. What are some of the characteristics that we find with successful researchers? What are some of the characteristics that they have that makes them successful? What makes a successful researcher?
Curiosity, and having a solution in mind, having an end game solution in mind.
Actually, Keith, you read my mind because I was going to say curiosity as well. I think that, and the key is also asking good questions. I think the questions are often more important than the answers. Asking good questions and then be persistent to help address those questions. I think those would be good attributes in my mind.
Very good. I think it's true. The more we find, the less we find we know, I guess. The more we learn, the more we find we don't know. So it just trampolines into another area, and it is just as important to find out, that we were wrong, our hypothesis is wrong. And because then we don't have to go down that, rabbit hole. So, but I agree, curiosity, I think that's key, wherever you're in as a researcher. Well, very good. I appreciate both you guys being on our podcast today, and hopefully we'll run into each other. It'd be in the summer. I'm not a cold weather person, so I live in North Carolina, so I'm used to a really mild climate. I don't know if I could stand the winters in Minnesota, so it had to be in the summer. But
we're gonna work that out.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
very good. You guys have a good one. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monty.
Thank you. Bye.